Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back, hipsters, to Podcast Land. Do you trust your technology? Is it useful? Is it harmful?
But before we get into that, that's still sub judice, let's tell you what exactly is 5G. What are the concerns? The thing to remember here is this is not the first time these kind of concerns around 5G technology have actually come up. The arguments against them have emerged time and again in several parts of the world, and a whole community of scientists have debated against the technology's implementation, citing it as a health hazard.
At 60 gigahertz, it means you have 60 gigahertz photon energy. Photon is the carrier of the electromagnetic force. So that's how electrons transfer energy between each other. Yes.
What does it affect humans?
Oh, absolutely. So this is how it is. If you are exposed to 60 gigahertz millimeter wave radiation, which is being attenuated by oxygen in the atmosphere, everything that has to do with oxygen in your blood, oxygen in your atmosphere, what happens is the electrons, which form a covalent bond that make oxygen diatomic, even if the activation energy required to break the bond, that happens on the ionizing radiation. It breaks bonds. But on non-ionizing radiation, it has enough energy to change the spin of the electron, which basically destabilizes its ability to function in simple terms as we can use it.
So in simple terms, the water in our body is being affected, which makes us breathe and live as a human being.
Now, question is it hidden in plain sight?
Yeah, what is? Hidden in plain sight.
This is news to me. Hidden in plain sight.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad.
Please stay tuned.
Hold it now, wait.
Please, wake up.
Can 5G radiation make you sick? What we found.
5G is all the rage right now, but some people are worried that it could make them sick. So we've decided to do a deep dive on this new technology and find out how it affects the human body. Roll that tape. Are you sick of slow mobile data speeds? Do you hate waiting for video streaming services to load? Is the second life you built in virtual reality to escape the crushing existence of the real world constantly disappointing you? Then have we got the gift for you. Introducing 5G. 5G is the next generation technology for mobile networks, an evolution of 3G and 4G that promises lightning fast speeds, lower latency and increased network connections. It's now rolling out to a telco provider near you, and all you need to do is... Alright, so 5G sure sounds like a promising new technology, but some are concerned it may have adverse health effects. In November 2018, a social media post went viral and it suggested that in the Netherlands, 300 birds had died due to 5G testing. Forums are awash with activists suggesting that the dangers of cell phone radiation are being suppressed. So, does 5G actually have health effects? Or is it just a conspiracy theory that's getting a little bit out of hand? Whack on your tinfoil hats, we're going to find out. Okay, so why are people afraid of 5G? One word: radiation. All of our connected devices emit radio frequency electromagnetic energy of various wavelengths. Low frequency wavelengths are used in, say, powering your smartphones, TVs and computers. And this is referred to as non-ionizing radiation. It's not considered energetic enough to cause any health effects. On the other side of the spectrum, you have high-frequency wavelengths such as ultraviolet radiation from the sun or X-rays. This is a more powerful type of energy and it's known as ionizing radiation. It can rip electrons away from atoms and do some real damage to DNA. And if you're exposed to a lot of this type of radiation, like say some of these beachgoers may be, it can introduce errors into your DNA, causing the growth of diseases such as cancer. Fortunately, 5G radiation is non-ionizing, completely different to radiation from the sun or from X-rays. Wait, so why are people worried? Well, there are a few important changes coming with 5G technology that have some people concerned about the negative health effects. One, it'll use millimeter wave technology. Two, that technology operates at higher frequencies than 3G and 4G. And three, That means we'll need more base stations and antennas to ensure we cover the same ground. So how exactly will millimeter wave technology affect the human body? We're going to need a diagram. The skin is a very effective barrier against things like bacteria, viruses, and even the weather. Now here's the thing about 5G. Ionizing radiation, such as some wavelengths of UV from the sun, can penetrate the skin, whereas things like radio waves actually penetrate through the skin without doing any damage at all. 5G wavelengths fall smack in the middle. They only barely penetrate the skin and they don't have the energy required to damage DNA. Still, that information isn't enough to allay fears. Many opponents of 5G point to a World Health Organization report in 2011 that suggests cell phone radiation could cause cancer. Now, that report was put together by the International Agency for Research on Cancer and suggests that cell phone radiation should be listed as possibly carcinogenic, like aloe leaf extract, diesel fuel, and pickled vegetables. So I asked Andrew Wood, a professor at Swinburne University, exactly what that rating means.
If there's any evidence of some sort of association between exposure to these things and certain types of cancer, then it goes into the possibly carcinogenic bracket. If it's backed up with laboratory studies, mechanism studies, then it gets boosted up to the probably carcinogenic bracket.
Thousands of scientific studies have been performed looking at radio frequency radiation and its effects on human cells, animals like rats and mice, and human tissue including brain, skin, and eyes. And there's literally mountains of data and mountains of research suggesting that there's no link between cell phone radiation and something like cancer. But take a look online and you'll find hundreds of websites and Facebook groups with a laundry list of problems apparently associated with 5G. So we've taken a look at this list and we're going to clear those things up. Roll that clip, me. Thanks, Jackson. Mark is ready. So 5G is new and untested. Well, actually, 5G isn't new. The wavelengths have been used in airport scanners and radar for a long time, and initially, 5G will actually use the same wavelengths as 4G. More antennas means more exposure. As we've already shown, 5G isn't energetic enough to penetrate the skin or damage DNA. Some scientists even suggest that new beamforming technology could reduce exposure. High-frequency wavelengths are worse than low-frequency wavelengths. Well, that's not the case for ionizing radiation and other radio waves. I mean, even visible light can penetrate the skin if it's powerful enough. And of course, 5G is a mind control experiment.
That sounds great, but aren't there studies that show that cell phone use causes cancer?
Well, mate, that's kind of complicated. The easy answer is not really. Two of the most frequently mentioned studies are 1, the US National Toxicology Study, and 2, a study by Italy's Ramazzini Institute. In both studies, male rats that were exposed to huge amounts of radio frequency radiation sometimes developed cancer in their hearts and in their brains. However, the studies have been dubbed controversial because they feature huge amounts of radiation and exposure that far exceeds what humans would experience, making it much harder to draw conclusions. All that is to say that many of the arguments against 5G are not based in strong scientific fact. Despite that, over 240 scientists and researchers have petitioned the World Health Organization Environment Program to take another look at the damage radio frequency radiation may be having. And not just on humans, but also on the environment. And one question that remains is, can we actually rule out the long-term effects of exposure to 5G wavelengths?
In my mind, it's unlikely. I guess my main reason for saying that is that people have looked at brain tumour and other tumour rates over the last few decades, and during that time, the usage of mobile phones has gone from 0 in 1980 to more or less all of the human population So you'd expect a massive increase in incidence of certain types of tumour if indeed there was a cause and effect relationship.
And that makes sense, right? I mean, phones practically surround every single facet of our daily lives, and they've done so for the last 20 years. So we should see an increase in the incidence of brain tumours. But we don't. Studies in the US, Europe and Australia have all failed to show increasing brain cancer rates since the 1990s when phones became heavily adopted. Even though 5G hasn't been around long enough to perform these types of studies with cell phones, the frequencies and wavelengths it uses have been.
Now, it's not that nobody knows anything about these frequencies, because people used to use waveguides for communication systems and also for radar systems. And so there's been like half a century of experiments where biological systems have been exposed to these high frequencies without anything too dramatic appearing.
So where does that leave us? Well, on one hand, we need more good science. We need more research into 5G millimeter wavelengths and long-term studies examining how exposure affects human health. What we don't need is Denise from Facebook telling everyone that cell phones are going to give them cancer or that 5G is a mind control experiment. Denise, seriously, give it a rest. Anyway, I'm Jackson Ryan, science editor at CNET.com, and you're probably watching this on a mobile phone emitting radiation. But don't worry.
What say you? What do you take away from that last clip that you just played?
Well, again, you have to give look at all the pros and cons and the information that's out there. Mm-hmm. But what I truly believe that it's somewhat of a propaganda pose. The video itself was sponsored by CNET, and CNET, as you know, is pro technology.
Technology, yes.
If you go to their website, you can see that it tells you all the difference about what TVs, what iPads or tablets to purchase, and what specs that they have, and iPhones and such.
Right. There used to be a good go-to site. Yes.
It used to be. I believe that they still have some relevance, but the problem is, again, for the past 2 years, there have been either been pro-vax or non-vax, and I believe that, again, there's a large connection, and that people haven't yet put together, or we haven't had the information needed to know how these two are related. Right. So in that fact, we need to have more information. You was saying, Vessel 2?
I agree with you. More reliable information is needed, and that is something that was common in all three clips that we've heard, the two videos and the clip that you just played. They all pretty much came to the same conclusion, that there is not enough information, reliable information, that we can use at this time that will give us a positive 100% outlook on whether or not 5G is going to harm us in the long run or not. Right. And yeah, I think the video, the last clip you played, was a lot of information, very insightful. And like I said, all of the clips that we've heard so far, that common theme is the takeaway. And you need to be mindful of that. Everybody needs to keep that in mind. They're still going to push how it is going to be convenient, but they're not giving you the full information as far as what you need to be safe. And if you think the microwave frequencies are not harmful, if you think cell phone frequencies are not harmful, then ask yourself this: why you can't have your grandmother or grandfather in the kitchen when the microwave is on if they have a pacemaker.
There you go. Excellent, excellent, excellent. That's excellent.
Now, can you imagine the older generation, especially where we're at? We're in, well, I'm not, but the ones who are in Tokyo, because that's where the towers are mainly focused at now. Once they really start cranking up the frequencies, and how is that going to affect the older population? There are, you know, I'm assuming some older grandparents here who have pacemakers. So how is that going to affect them? And a personal story that I wish to share with the audience is I was on the train once and I was standing in front of an old man with the heart sign on his, around his collar, on his chest. It was just a plastic laminated sign with kind of like a broken heart. And I didn't catch it at first, but I was on my cell phone standing in front of this older man. And as soon as I turned on my cell phone to check whether or not it was a message for me there, I noticed this man started to shake. And then I was paying attention to him, but also trying to check my phone. And I noticed his hands beginning to come my way. And it was a slow, steady shaking movement of this older gentleman's hand. And by the time it got halfway to me, I looked at him and I saw that he was a heart patient. So I immediately put my cell phone in my pocket and I stepped back from him and I was saying to him, sorry. And then I looked around me and no one was using the cell phone around me. But then a lady on my left side, she took out her cell phone and I looked at the old man, and it took him about maybe less than a minute for him to figure out who had a cell phone. And he started to reach for this lady, but she wasn't paying attention to him. So I told her that she needs to put her phone away because he has a heart condition. And she was like, oh, go on the side, go on the side. So speaking from experience, our cell phones have a strong enough frequency to affect people's hearts if they have a heart pacemaker. Just to throw that out there to the family. Take that for whatever you wish to, but I've had the experience myself.
Wow. Thanks, Vessel, too, for sharing that.
No problem.
And yes, it's important, us as a community, as a people, especially human beings, to be more conscious and aware of our surroundings and who our technology or what we're doing, how do it will affect people. But what I noticed also with all these videos that we have shared thus far, they all say the same thing. They all talk about radiation, all talk about cancer, all talk about tumors, brain tumors, and they're also trying to push the fast speed. That's one of the first things you hear about, the fast speed of this technology. But again, the last video says that it shouldn't have too much problems with affecting people. But along with your story, they all spoke about the same problems that they don't supposed to have, but they all mention it in each video. So I thought that was peculiar as well. So yeah, it's a shambles. But moving along, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do our last uh, 5G concern video, and this one I gotten from um, our friend and a buddy, Sean Anthony, and it's a very quick audio, about 2 minutes, and he's talking about the dangers of 5G or what they found, and this is what's recent. So let's take a quick listen to this, and we'll move on.
There's 11 reasons we should be concerned about this 5G technology. And number one, it says it's going to produce a denser soup of electrosmog. We're going to be bombarded by really high frequencies at low short range intensities, creating a yet more complicated, denser soup of electrosmog. Number two, it's going to affect the skin. The biggest concern is how these new wavelengths will affect the skin. And it goes on to say the human body has between 2 million to 4 million sweat ducts. And it explains that our sweat ducts act like an array of helical antennas when exposed to these wavelengths. So that's something to be concerned with. Number three says that 5G has effects on our eyes. Effects on our eyes. Number four, effects of the heart. The heart, excuse me. Number five, it would affect the immune system. Immune system. Number six, effects on cell growth rates. Number seven, effects on bacteria resistance. Now that's really concerning as well. Number eight, effects on plant health. This is going to affect our plants. Think GMOs on steroids, it says. The water that falls from the sky onto these plants will also be irradiated. This is crazy. Number nine, effects on the atmosphere and depletion of fossil fuels. Number 10, disruption of the natural ecosystem. And number 11, it says most 5G studies are misleading.
That audio.
Yeah, shout out to cousin Sean Anthony, breaking it down. 11 very detailed, important problems concerning 5G. And number 6 and 7 kind of stood out to me. He said skin problems, and
Yes.
eye problems, and
eye problems.
heart problems, and also he said immune problems, right?
Yes, immune
And
system problem. Yes.
all of that okay, let's see. You have the heart, you have the eyes, and the skin. Eyes, I don't know so much, but the skin, the heart, and your immune system, that all relies upon the oxygen intake you have in your body.
So
and
that's
how,
the eyes.
right? I say yes to the eyes, but I would say more so this is going to be problematic for people's eyes is because your eyes are a lot of liquid. So if your body temperature or the temperature around you is increasing, so your eyes were going to dry out. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know. Yeah. I'm not a scientist. I'm just speculating here, but I'm assuming you will probably have some type of eye problems because of the heat rising. Right. So yeah, I appreciate you playing that clip because that brings further clarity to some of the problems that are on the horizon, and none of those problems seem to be easily reversible.
Right, that's correct.
This 5G, like I said, I don't think either myself or you, Vessel One, are against technology in any means, by any means. But I think we both stand for humanity. And if it's going to do more harm for the people, to the people, then I vote no. I vote, let's just stay where we're at, stay on the 4G until we get better and more up-to-date information about how 5G is going to really affect us globally, individually, and then community-wise.
Right. I concur wholeheartedly. Taken from 60 Minutes, and in this, as we know, 5G is coming to the forefront, and they're pushing hard for this to go through and have things fall under this new technology. And with that, as we mentioned, the connections of 5G to somewhat maybe this uh, vaccine, and ultimately, this is what they're looking to do, is to bring the transhuman aspect to the forefront. And so this is somewhat a segue. We'll probably go more detail in future uh, episodes, but just to sum up this 5G technology and where it's possibly going, um, it's somewhat of the new ideal of transhuman, and a lot of people are talking about how transhuman is the new slave mentality by having man integrate with machine. And so this little bit from 60 Minutes basically is small clips of from the episode article, Whose Body Is It Anyway? And so we're going to run through this really quick. It's about 2 minutes long. So here we go.
As we first reported last winter, the race to identify our genetic makeup is equal only to the rush by the biotech industry to patent those genes. That's right, patent them, just like Thomas Edison's light bulb. You may not know it, but at least 1,000 human genes have already been patented and thousands more are pending, which means that chances are your genetic structure and mine, our most private property, may well belong. While technology takes us into a brave new world, the old world's laws are racing to catch up. Patents used to be reserved for inventions like the light bulb or the cotton gin. But in 1980, the Supreme Court ruled that a life form, a genetically altered bacterium used in oil spills, could be patented. As biotech companies began looking into gene research, that ruling became their license to patent human genes, and the gold rush was on.
Doctors are searching the globe looking at patients as potential treasure troves because they can use your blood to find a very lucrative gene.
Lori Andrews is an attorney who is also an advisor to Congress on biotech issues. She says that patents were never intended for products of nature like genes, which in her mind are hardly inventions.
The U.S. Constitution established the patent system to reward inventors. The idea that genes could be private property instead of public knowledge seemed absurd, and yet that's exactly the point we're in now.
When the late Jonas Salk came out with the polio vaccine, and he was asked why he didn't patent it, he said, quite famously,
"Could you patent the sun?"
Could you patent the sun? Nevertheless, all these years later, the Salk Institute holds hundreds of patents. How did we get from that altruistic approach to this?
I think that greed has become a cultural value in healthcare.
Whose body is it anyway? Vessel 2, what say you?
Yeah, that's the question. Whose body is it? And it reminds me, listening to this reminds me of how the promotion and the propaganda of getting your family tree, I guess, established when you're taking your DNA test. You're sending your samples of your DNA to these companies, and they tell you supposedly where you come from in the world. That's a large database, and we don't know what they're doing with that DNA. They were talking about in the clip that they're using people's blood to come up with certain patentable, I guess, articles. I don't know how you would even patent, something coming out of someone's blood, but this is the mad scientist, Migdala. It's really it's borderline nonsensical to think about the extremes these organizations are going to try to either transition the human race into what they see fit, or they're seems to be on a hunt for some type of way to be able to preserve a certain, I guess, group of people. I guess that's how I would phrase it. A group of people, their means to be immortal is how I see it.
Right.
What say you, Vessel One?
I totally concur. There are a group of or a cult, a group of ethnic people that believes that there are somewhat privileged to have a infinite lifespan or live as long as they can. They used to do much research, or as you even stated, they did much research of blood, and what they in the beginning of that, uh, they found out that if they took a young mouse blood and transfused it into an older mouse, the older mouse actually became youthful. The organs were somewhat rejuvenated. Their actions and their even sexual hormones was somewhat heightened as well. And that was just the beginning of that. But also wanted to put in that again, we can come back to this in near future, but there was another NHK in a 60 Minutes kind of episode documentary when they was talking about they have found, this is during the pandemic as well, they found out that China was taking some PR tests and different blood samples and experimenting and researching on blood. They was the American, but they was talking about they was coming from America at the time. The blood samples were coming from, and the PCR test was coming from America. So yeah, it is a very daunting situation, but the blood aspect of it, again, I believe is because of what's in the jab that they're trying to um, somewhat manage or control to see how it will affect or how they can maintain what's going to come going back to the 5G aspect. So since the 5G is microwave waves and also the broadband that is producing, if you're able to have something that can ground the uh, the waves, especially in the blood or plasma, it's very useful transferring or actually transmutation of human to machine. And on that note, Is there anything else you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic. I mean, a lot of the conversation is still yet to be had. And I think until we actually know more details in regards of the safety behind the technology, I'm not necessarily in favor to roll it out in such a hurry. But yeah, good outlet of information. As always, I appreciate you, Vessel One.
And IU Vessel 2. We keep it going, and we got everything on lock in that sense, and we bringing it to the people in the community, and we doing our due diligence and bringing out what's going on in our community and around the world, and hopefully it doesn't fall on deaf ears. Again, thank you, hipsters, for tuning in again to another episode of Hipsnews. I'm Vessel 1 with Vessel 2, and we're signing out. But before we go, Vessel 2, can you give us your final thoughts?
Thank you, Vessel One. 5G was today's topic. We're not here to persuade you, our family, our audience, to think in any way. The conversation here was today to be had for us to be able to just think for ourselves about what is being presented to us. The last thing I want us to do as a family is to make a decision on information that is not complete. Think for yourself, stand on your square, make sure those who you consider to be loved ones know that you love them. Stay virus free. Peace.
Peace.